The statistic that's out there right now, which is just mind blowing to me, is the average person living in the US is losing 2 to 5 years off their life from eating fast food. I know that I cannot break your fast food habits. So my solution is healthy fast food. If we can accomplish that, I think we'll get to a point in time within the next 8 to 10 years that 1 in every 10 people living in the US is a customer of ours. So today that's about 35 million people. 35 million people, if we give them a minimum of 2 years of their life back on average from being a customer, that's 70 million years contributed back to humanity. I would be okay with that on my tombstone.
Sure.
That's what keeps me going. I plan to be building this company for the next 2 to 3 decades because that's what it's going to take.
All right. Welcome back to another great episode of Out of Office. You got me, Kartik, and Jack, my co-host, of course. But we have Clayton, our guest, a vertical farmer. And we're so excited to talk to you. Clayton, how are you doing?
Good. How about you guys?
Pretty good. Can't complain. So Clayton, right off the bat, you have a company named after yourself, Clayton Farms. Please tell us more about it. What do you guys do?
Yeah, so today we put farms inside restaurants so customers can enjoy healthier, tastier salads. But that's definitely not where our journey started back in 2017. So I was born and raised in southeast Iowa on a small family farm, mostly row crops, so corn, beans, and hay. I was the only child growing up, and manual labor in agriculture was every day, so 7 days a week, 365 days a year. When I left the family farm to go off to college to Iowa State University, I told myself never doing anything with farming or agriculture ever again. So first lesson, never say never. Flash forward to after moving to Ames, I actually dropped out of college to play poker professionally.
Oh, wow.
So I traveled World Series of Poker, European Poker Tour stops, loved it. It took me all over the place. But then when I ended up moving back to Iowa in 2015, I fell in love with startups and what technology can do to make the world a better place. And then came full circle with agriculture in my blood. Started my first company, first food technology company called Kinosol. At Kinosol, we designed and built solar food dehydrators for farmers in developing countries. So I was co-founder and chief product officer. We focused on taking it from prototype through commercial launch into about 50 countries worldwide. I primarily spent my time with partners in Eastern Africa, so Rwanda, Uganda, Tanzania, and some partners in Brazil. While traveling literally halfway around the world to implement this physical product, I kept coming back to this question, what does food security mean in our own backyard? Starting in my case, central Iowa. And about 3 years into building Kinosol, I left the day-to-day and remained on the board of directors. And I put that question out there. It was literally just, into my 24 readers on my blog. And I said, food security, there's more food deserts than ever before. Why is that? How can we fix it? And the genesis of Clayton Farms is I had a friend from community college, Dane Poole, who today is co-founder and CTO, reach out to me and say, hey, I've got the answer to your question, and it's indoor farming. And I think almost all of their indoor farms get it wrong. Let's chat. And from there, 8 years later, we're going.
Amazing. I want to go back to the beginning. You said a lot that we absolutely cannot gloss over. Okay, the first things first. Okay, you say small town. There's always a fun competition I like to do. So what was the population? I wonder if I can beat you or not. Oh, there we go. Wow, good for you. I'm from a small town called Belmont, Ohio, 420 and dropping. But yeah, it looks like you beat me. Congratulations.
All right, thanks. I don't know if it's a good thing. And actually, it has continued to shrunk just like rural does.
Yeah. I usually bring that up when people ask, and I'm always surprised it's getting smaller. But I guess that makes sense, right? Because no one's moving in. So
that's right.
Yeah. Okay, pushing forward more seriously, how does this poker thing start? How do you get so seriously into it? Tell us about your first game maybe and why you decided to dig into that.
Yes. So, something about me not too many people know is I couldn't really speak until I was 8 years old. So I was born with I'd say a speech impediment where I just couldn't pronounce half the alphabet. And being in a rural area, not a lot of resources, speech therapy wasn't even close to what it is obviously today, and in more areas with resources. So I really struggled with that. Looking back, I actually, I place some of the blame on the lack of nutrition for just development in the area because one, Iowa is a meat and potato state. Two, grew up in a food desert. It's still a food desert today. I remember thinking back to some of the early meals I had as a kid and very few vegetables, very canned green beans. As an example, right?
Sure.
Nothing really fresh. And especially with the agriculture in Iowa, mostly focused on livestock or, producing food that doesn't actually go into people enjoying it. So because I couldn't speak properly, my mind was naturally drawn to numbers.
Mm.
And so by like age 7, I was like, ooh, counting like blackjack decks
Interesting.
and things like that. And by the age of 14, I was playing a lot of collectible card games competitively. So I was on
Okay.
the Junior Super Series Pro Tour for Magic the Gathering.
Okay.
So 14 to 16 playing that. I loved the game. I loved the game theory, the deductive reasoning, statistics. And then I started networking with individuals who had started in Magic the Gathering and moved on to playing online poker full time. And they told
Mm.
me there was way more money in it. And so by the time I was 16, 17, I had set up an online poker account under family members' names. Playing. I got pretty lucky early on, but then I obsessed over actually reviewing the hands. And then I treated poker very much like a business. When I dropped out of Iowa State, I saw it as a business with 3 revenue streams. Raised investment to move up in stakes. I coached and charged an hourly. And then I also invested in lower stakes players and tried to get them to become better at the game. So that's my genesis of poker career. I couldn't
When
speak, so naturally numbers.
that's incredible. I mean, when you're investing in other players, how do you determine like who's good or who's bad? I'm curious like what your picking is because I only heard about this recently. I have a cousin who's a doctor but he plays poker like semi-professionally on the side. And he just told me, he's like, yeah, I just made my first investment into this kid and like I made great money and like he's doing it more and more. So I'm curious like what that looks like. How do you make that determination?
Well, nowadays there's like literal platforms and sites that if somebody's going to the World Series of Poker and they want to sell some of their action, they can sell, 20% of
Ah,
their
interesting.
package
Okay.
for all their tournaments. Way back in like kind of the heyday, and the biggest thing that stopped me in my tracks was online poker was taken away in the US in April of
Mm,
2011. It was known as Black
okay.
Friday. All of our funds were confiscated overnight, all of the
Whoa.
URLs and websites gone. I lost my career and 95% of my net worth, just
What?
like that.
Wait, where's the
Yes.
money?
So DOJ came in and they said it
Wow.
wasn't regulated because of the Unlawful Internet Enforcement Gambling Act,
Okay.
UIGEA. Flash forward to today, it's never actually returned to the states at the scale it was. Everything is segmented kind of region by region. But way back when I was investing in lower stakes or micro stakes players,
Yep.
I would essentially set it up to where if they had played 1,000 games of the format that I was good at, and I felt like that was a proper sample size to see what their return on investment was, and then I would try to take like the top 10% and then say, hey, I'll stake you and coach you. You move up one more level, and then we'll do some kind of profit sharing. Most times it was profit
Mm,
sharing, but
I see.
myself, I was part of what's called a stable. So some like a really good group of poker players out there invested in kind of the next up and coming group. We all shared hand histories, nerded out over the data all the time.
Amazing. And so how do you go from poker to making this impact in food and where did that transition come from?
Yes. So I was living in Dublin, Ireland on a 1 year holiday visa. I actually moved from living in Denver, Colorado to Dublin so I could go back to playing poker full time.
Okay.
And when I got to Dublin, networked, met a lot of poker players turned angel investors in technology
Mm,
companies. A lot of them were looking to diversify or kind of transition out of the game. And early on, I was in my early mid 20s at the time. Early on, a lot of professionals with much more wisdom than I had pointed out to me that success in poker is just measured by money won and lost. And so ultimately it becomes pretty shallow for impact. Now, at the
yep.
time, I was playing a video game essentially for a living, so I was pretty happy. But I had my best year of my poker career ever. I tried to extend my visa, and then Irish immigration said no and asked me very nicely to leave the country.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so as I had the countdown on of like, okay, this is like I'm going back to the States. Now what? I was thinking about continuing to move abroad again since it wasn't available in the US. And when I got back to Iowa, what really had stuck with me was those poker players turned angel investors. And they said, if you ever focus on making the world a better place, do it through technology, focus on something that scales, actually has the impact. It will be way harder, but more rewarding than playing online poker and 40 tables at once, etc. And so I was intrigued by that. I had thankfully started reading blogs like Paul Graham blogs,
Sure.
and I'm like, okay, so the best way to learn how to start a startup is to join one. I started reaching out to people I knew in central Iowa, came across a couple of startups in the ag and food space, but I felt like I really couldn't contribute to their product or service. I took a step back and I said, okay, what do I know and who else can I network with? And about that time, I said, I want to lean into my strengths. Growing up as an Iowa farm kid, you always have to tinker, always have to build things because when things break, farmers are stubborn. And I met a group of students at Iowa State University, and they were competing in what's called the Thought for Food Challenge. It's a global business plan competition, happens every year. That year is sponsored by Syngenta and Microsoft. And they put out the statistic that 1/3 of all food that's produced goes to waste. And their call to action for this competition was build a product or a service that addresses this. So we sat down as a team, and I quickly realized like I liked the theory, the marketing, and like the experience around the products. And so we wanted to play to our strengths. We started to realize a lot of us had experience traveling and living abroad and extensive traveling in developing regions. And we realized in developing regions, food waste wasn't just 1/3, it was actually 2/3 of all food produced. And that's because you have a smallholder farmer or someone living off of literally what they grow to barter for everything. And they don't have proper post-harvest techniques in place. So best example is like very middle of nowhere in Uganda, you have a mango farmer. Every time that they're going to harvest the mangoes, they get to a point in time where they can take them to the markets, but most of the mangoes end up rotting while on the vine.
Wow. Okay.
And so that led us to what happens if we focus on solar food dehydrators. That's natural convection system built for the smallholder farmer, kind of pop up in a few minutes. Could this preserve some of the nutrition, some of the flavor for them? And could they have access to this year round? Plus, if it's dehydrated, could they sell it in market for more money?
Yeah.
So that's the genesis of Kinosol.
Okay. Wow. How big did that operation get? How was it funded?
Yes. So hindsight's 2020. We had the chance to raise pretty early on from what I would call like impact angels.
Yeah.
And we chose to bootstrap everything.
Interesting.
We entered a few hundred pitch competitions, and we ended up winning about $500,000 between cash and prizes and pitch competitions, non-dilutive. We had a couple of awesome mentors who really pointed out to us early on, like, sell the prototypes. Don't do a free beta, do a paid beta. And without that feedback, I think it would have fizzled out early on. But ultimately, in the first 3 years, we took it from prototype to commercial launch in about 50 countries worldwide. The pre-sales and selling like literal prototypes that they looked ugly, but they worked.
Sure.
That was key for us. Basically towards the end of 2016, looking to transition out of the day-to-day. And it was on my mind of like, I need to focus on a product and service in my own backyard. At that time, the company was doing mid 6 figures in revenue, no debt, really small team. It was working for that stage. We had this kind of weird lens applied to venture capital of like, we don't actually want it right now. We don't need it right now. Obviously pros and cons, right? And after leaving the day-to-day, the best story I have from Kinosol is co-founder and CEO, Michaela. At the time, a year into building the company, we started dating. Today, we're happily married.
Okay.
So that's like the best exit you could ever have from a company, right? You end up with a partner for life. But
how did you meet? How did you end up working together on this?
Yeah, so on campus, the student group who I got connected to, I walked into, I had just left a boxing practice. Walked in, I'm supposed to meet this group of students. I was, a few years older. And they're like, okay, so poker player.
Sounds like a long game.
Yeah, poker player, boxer.
I'll join your company, Sure.
I just said like, hey, I'm an Iowa farm kid. I'll do the heavy lifting. What are you all excited about building? So there were 4 co-founders of the company total.
I see. Okay.
Yes.
It's incredible. Wow.
And is the reason that you transitioned out of that just like you had the idea for the next idea and your wife is already running it, or what drove your decision to leave?
Yeah, so it was not burnout. It was the pace at which, and I hate to put it this way, but I like to like move sometimes too fast. And doing business in developing regions, there are a lot of hurdles. So like as an example, I'll share this story, probably get in trouble for it later. But the idea of, so we had a solar powered food dehydrator. It was supposed to be tax exemptions on the imports. And then we had partners who helped us coordinate these large shipping containers full of like hundreds of dehydrators. And we were supposed to be able to get it to our distribution partners, and it was like no hiccups. Some of the NGOs, non-governmental organizations, and some of the port officials who were government officials decided to not release those without bribes. And in those situations, it was like, well, we're doing nothing wrong. Who do you call and who do you get in trouble? And it's like, wow, this is the person who you normally call. This is weird. And then I started to realize, like, if I was traveling to one of our partner locations and you're there for 15 to 20 days, you have kind of 3 days to get there, 3 days back, and and you get back, and like I wanted to go, but I also like was just obsessed with what does food security mean. And then I started to become hyper aware. It's almost like if you buy a new vehicle and you start to notice like the same vehicle or the same color of the vehicle. I'm like, oh my gosh, food security. Like this is crazy in our own backyard. And then
Yep.
I looked up the statistics and like USDA 20 years ago, when I would have left the family farm, they had somewhere between 6,000 and 6,500 food deserts.
Wow.
And like fast forward today, it's like 8 to 10,000 food deserts, depending on how you break it down. And I'm like, what is going on? Why is it getting worse?
Clayton,
So
can you
that,
define food desert?
yeah, so I like to take just like a really simple example is you
Sure.
have to travel more than 10 miles to have access to something that is truly fresh. So most times
Okay.
vegetables, fruit.
Okay.
And there's urban and rural food deserts. So of course I'm from a rural food desert. Urban food deserts, like in the Midwest, if you think about like Minneapolis, St. Paul, there's a lot of food deserts throughout because it's not easily accessible. So either priced out or have to travel too far to access that.
Sure. Okay. Cool.
So you had this idea. I know we met in a Discord, 4 or 5 years ago. Was that the next step? How did you go from this idea to meeting Founders Inc. to where you are today?
Yes. So in 2017, when I posted that question about food security in your own backyard, how do we get better food for more people? Danon reached out to me, and I was very intrigued because his response was, hey, the answer is indoor farming, but almost everybody's getting it wrong.
Yeah.
So I sat down and I was like, tell me why you think everyone's getting it wrong. And he kind of painted two pictures. And he said, on one side of the coin, you have very large vertical farming companies. They've raised hundreds of millions or close to $1 billion in some cases in venture capital. They're based on the coast. And what they want is, at the end of the day, they want robots running the farm. And I don't believe there's any path to profitability. And again, this was 2017. So best example, Arrow Farms in New Jersey. And I said, okay, so no path to profitability. They have bells and whistles, robots running the farm. And then he also pointed out, he's like, it's also a consumer packaged good. So they're doing the most amount of work as the farm, turning around and wholesaling it to distributors and grocers. And then you see these photos and it's people wearing lab coats and purple spaceship lights, and it does not scream good food to consumers.
Sure.
So I was intrigued by that. And I said, well, what's the other side of the coin? And he said, okay, so more in the Midwest, you have greenhouses that it's too expensive during the dead of winter when there's 3 feet of snow outside in Iowa to heat unless you're taking advantage of the cubic feet. And the farmers who have these greenhouses, they wanted diversification. So maybe they have some acreage outdoors and then they set up some greenhouses and then they take this food to farmers markets. So if they take the food to farmers markets, they're always trying to line up production and demand. That leads to too much waste. If they go the more exciting route, kind of on the surface, it's they get an off-taker agreement. So let's say a Hy-Vee grocery store or similar to a Safeway comes in and says, hey, we'll buy everything you can produce, lock in this price. And then they ended up turning around and wholesaling and pushing out profitability. And all of a sudden, the average indoor farm in the United States was taking 7 years to turn a profit.
Wow.
That's why a lot of them go under. And Danon said, it's also weird that the average indoor farm in the US is 40,000 plus square feet. That
Sure.
means you have to grow further away from consumers. What if we focused on designing and building our own equipment? So hydroponics, the growing equipment, the software that runs that equipment. And instead of 40,000 square feet, we start with 1,000 square feet. If we can accomplish that, that means we can take over vacant spaces. We can grow closer to the consumer. We can cut out the middlemen. We can capture more of the value, be vertically integrated, and own the supply chain from seed to.
And this is maybe a very stupid question or maybe a good one. How fast do vegetables grow and how much can you grow in 1,000 square feet? So I guess how many like tomatoes are you producing from 1,000 square feet in a week?
Yes, so we think about it as leafy greens and microgreens. So if we focused on lettuce instead of vine crops like tomatoes,
Sure.
really round, nice number is 10 pounds of food produced per square foot each year.
Okay.
And so you got 10,000 pounds of food out of 1,000 square feet, and that's because you're taking advantage of the cubic footage. So everything
Yep.
is stacked.
Yep.
And, early on, a lot of trial and error about what to grow. And we decided to focus on volume and then how fast we could grow something from seed to harvest. And with lettuce, if you have lettuce growing in your garden as an example, you're looking at essentially 2 months. If we have our equipment fine-tuned, giving the plants exactly what they need for nutrients, exactly what they need for light, for water, and it's a controlled environment, we actually can shave about a third off. And so what we do today is we start everything from seed in our nursery. It takes up way less space. It's in our nursery for 2 weeks. Then we transplant it into our larger growing units, and it's there for 4 more weeks. So there's just 4 generations. And then we stagger that. So every single week we're harvesting essentially 1/4 the farm, 52 weeks a year.
And another zinger of a question. Do plants grow at night? If I have a plant outside, is it growing at night, or am I getting twice as much growth if I plant it inside with the right lighting?
Good question. We're actually asked this a lot of, well, why don't you just leave the lights on longer and grow the plants faster, as an example. The plants, just like us, we need our rest. Mm-hmm. And so today our lighting schedules is 12 hours on, 12 hours off. And so we've over the years had to learn by trial and error, killing a lot of lettuce to learn what not to do. One question we're asked is, do we get bugs in our farm? And I like to joke the only bugs we get are software bugs. Sometimes updates are pushed the next day and you've killed all the lettuce because the lights stayed on and burned everything.
Okay.
That's not fun for anybody.
Sure. Okay.
And so you're growing, maybe to ground that, could you tell us like how much you get out of a similar space just outdoors, just classic farming versus what you're doing? And I guess the follow-up is, I guess naturally, if it's better, I could understand why previous startups thought like, oh, let's get as much square footage as possible. And so like, why do you think that didn't end up working out, I guess, for them?
Yes. So a traditional field farmed, that's not like the top 1% of lettuce growers. You can think of it as essentially they're trying to, at the end of the day, get 1 pound per square foot. So it's a 10x improvement. The reality is, though, because of all the inefficiencies and weather, you're going to get closer to 1/2 pound. So we're upwards of 20 times more food produced on a per square foot basis.
Yeah.
So one thing early on that we had a thesis on was we were at least a decade out from robotics being cheaper than people for seeding, transplanting, and harvesting in an indoor farm. And what's really cool is, 8 years into building the company, now we're seeing the cost of robotics drop. I loved your guys' episode with Weave Robotics as an example. And so as we said, like, we're not going to focus on robotics. We're going to focus on automations that can be proactive instead of reactive. And then we are going to have the human touch. As we thought about that, we said, what do the larger vertical farms get wrong with their space? And one example we noticed was a vertical farming company would come in and say, everything's stacked from floor to ceiling. And that's how we take advantage of every cubic foot since we're heating and cooling every cubic foot. But then we started to notice they had these giant aisles and you needed scissor lifts. And the scissor lifts, like the OSHA clearances and all this extra space. And we felt like that was wasted. And so one thing we focused on our pieces of growing equipment is it's on a track system with wheels. You can kind of think of it as a library. So if you're not transplanting or harvesting an aisle, there is no aisle. So little things like that you could have added a bunch of bells and whistles to, but instead we just said like fewer parts equal fewer problems.
Yep. Okay.
And help me visualize this. So is the idea that you'd come into San Francisco, there's a lot of vacant real estate, and you'd find like an empty storefront and take that over and set up vertical farms in there, and then like the Sweetgreen down the street could get lettuce directly from you. Is that the business model?
No. So let me take you a step back before the farms into restaurants. So when we started designing and building the growing equipment, ultimately we thought, how do we most effectively scale this? Mm-hmm. And we thought at first the best way was to equip new and expanding indoor farmers with our technology. So sell the growing equipment, license the software that runs that equipment for the recurring revenue piece. When we went through Y Combinator and at demo day, our one-liner was, we're the John Deere for indoor farming. So that was winter 2019 batch. After the batch, we got back to Iowa. We set up a model farm because we said, seeing is believing. We're going to build a full production farm. And then we were working with some local chefs, some local restaurants, but then individuals were coming through for tours. And then next thing you know, like we launched the farm at the beginning of 2020, January. 5 weeks later, it's like no one's coming through for tours.
Sure.
The following day, the governor announced like all restaurants were shutting down. So once again, I was in this position in life where I'm like overnight lost 100% of revenue and career. So that was tough. Like I had to lay off the entire software team. I said like, I don't know what this looks like. No one really did, of course. But at that time we said, what's a forced function? And we realized since we were in full production, we had 6 days before our next lettuce harvest and we had no homes for it. And in a perfect world, I would have given it to everybody in need. but we obviously had just lost all of our revenue, like paid pilots, everything came to a screeching halt. And so we said, we've got 6 days. What do we do? And 6 days later, we had launched an at-home subscription service for our greens. We dropped a pin at our location. We drew a 30-mile radius. And we allowed people to go to, at the time, it was not Clayton Farms, it was Nebulum. I know, way more techie sounding name. We had gotten the domain eatlettuce.com. And we said, so we started like pushing it out on Facebook. And we started to realize like our average customers, early 60s, female, top 1/4 income earner, owned their home, loved farmers markets. And they loved the idea of paying for not only the product, but the service for the delivery to their doorstep, because they weren't comfortable at the height of the pandemic going to the grocery store.
Yep.
And so we realized we leaned into that. A few months in, it was working really well, where we owned the supply chain from seed to someone's, delivery. So the first 2,000 deliveries, Dana and I did ourselves. Got the feedback in person, which was priceless to us. And with this model, we got pretty excited by it because we realized like the technology with the unit economics, it was way better for us. And we said, oh, this vertical integration thing is pretty exciting. And then Dana and I started to realize like our brains just work better around consumer instead of B2B. And so, I think startups don't have time to focus on your weaknesses. So, lean into your strengths there. And we said, okay, we're the farm. We own the quality. We own the story. Like if somebody asks to talk to the individual who like grows, it's someone on our team.
Yeah.
And we thought that was pretty powerful. And flash forward to the end of 2022, we started to see some of our customer acquisition costs from Facebook ads go up. On the fulfillment side, we had contracted out delivery drivers, and we started to reach like these pain points about, where do we expand to next? And we came across a statistic that showed in 2023, there'd be 100,000 restaurants shutting down in the US in just 1 year. And so we said, whoa, why so many restaurants? And the best case in point was Burger King. There were 1,000 locations shutting down that had the play places. And it's because post-pandemic, no one wants to take their kids to like the German-fested, like kind of the 90s style fast food, right? We saw that as an opportunity. So we said, what if we went in search of a vacant restaurant? We convert the dine-in space to the farm, and then it's salad wrap smoothies to the drive-through. So February 2023, we found a location in Ames. It was a Fazoli's Italian restaurant, fast food Italian. It still smelled like breadsticks the day we got the keys to the space. And we said, we're launching in 6 weeks. I remember interviewing early team members for the kitchen side, and everybody with like actual kitchen experience, I had none. I saw it as the farm side was 10 times more complex than the kitchen side. Kitchen side, we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. And a lot of individuals we were interviewing were like, oh, you can't launch in 6 weeks. You're going to need 6 months. And I said, we publicly announced we're launching on March 31st, 2023. So it's happening. And so we just kept interviewing until we found individuals who were like, this sounds awesome. I'm in. We pulled some all-nighters. We launched 6 weeks later, and we benchmarked everything with that model compared to previous models in the industry of indoor farming. And so average indoor farm, I mentioned earlier, 7 years to turn a profit. With the home delivery service, it took us 18 months, which good benchmark towards 7 years, but 18 months, obviously still a long time. The restaurant was profitable in month 2, and it's been profitable ever since. And then we also measured it in impact of people served. So it took us 2 years to reach 10,000 customers served with the home delivery service. It took us just under 2 years to reach 100,000 people served through the Clayton Farms Salads restaurant. So then we asked ourselves, if this works in Iowa, a meat and potato state, where is the best market we could go to for the most upside potential, the closest density to talent? And with a lot of ties with Y Combinator, Founders Inc., Orange DAO, out here we said this has got to be it. And so now I'm here full time. We are searching night and day for the next Clayton Farms salads. As soon as we launch the first one in San Francisco, in my mind, it's get it stood up, make sure operation efficiency is there. We're hitting our net margins, and then look for the next location, then the next location.
Amazing. So you're going to go head to head with Sweetgreen here in San Francisco. You can't leave that place, under $25. Is that going to change with Clayton Farms, or is it just going to be better?
Good question. It's simply going to be better because if you walk into a Sweetgreen and ask someone who the farmer is, most of the employees can't tell you. When you visit us, you can wave and talk with the farmer. I have a couple of company-wide policies. So one, everybody is a farmer. So there is no assistant, prep professional, supervisor. It's just everyone is a farmer.
Okay.
And then two, company-wide policy, don't spend any time on competition, but take inspiration. And so Sweetgreen, I take a lot of inspiration from, they're almost 20 years old as a company.
Sure.
In the early days, you kind of actually see their trajectory of like early days, work with smallholder farmers, quality was there, Google reviews were there. Flash forward to post IPO, Wall Street squeezes out some quality for margins. It's inevitable. And so I like some of their experiments they're doing. But I also feel like if you look at Sweetgreen just from like a public facing side, if the average location does 2 million for them, but it's losing $400,000 a year, like they got some things to figure out. Whereas in our location here, right out of the gate, we expected to do between like 1 and 1.5, but like 20% net margins is absolutely doable. Whereas in the average like QSR is like 8 to 9%. So razor thin, but I think the efficiency and us having the technology first approach and growing greens on site is our moat in how we approach expansion.
And okay, two questions, kind of joke questions, but I'm serious. So one, how has your experience growing on a farm impacted how farmers in restaurants now? That's insane. I think you said that to yourself 10 years ago. They'd be like, what are you talking about? Can you walk me through, was there overlap in skill? How do you think about it now that farmers can be inside in ACE all day? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, so I mean, the reality is I believe what you eat is your death sentence. That's what drives me. So today I do ultra marathon trail running. I've got a race on September 13th that I've been training all year for that I'm attempting to win. This will be my 23rd ultra marathon in like 6 years. Right. And so I'm salad power. I absolutely I'm guaranteed to eat more of our menu than everybody else, right? So living and breathing it. I get my blood work done multiple times a year. Health is everything to me, especially in building startups. Right, uphill battle nonstop. So if you don't have right body, right mind, that's really hard to do. But I also will say, I never planned to be a farmer. I never planned to be a restaurateur, but this needs to exist at that intersection. Yeah. And so if people meet me, I don't call myself, the co-founder and CEO. It's co-founder and chief farmer. I think that's something to do with the hard workingness of what I learned on the family farm as a kid. Be proud to grow food. Manual labor nonstop, and thinking through that, it's so technology is the unlock. That's what gets me excited. Urban farming is what gets me really excited because you have to go where people are. As an example, before we started this, we were chatting about rural and sizes of towns. Rural is shrinking. It's inevitable, yep. Right? And if you want to make sure food systems are in place and the right supply chain is there, it has to be locally grown, community by community. And then most people naturally don't want to make a lot of meals at home and they're looking for convenience. And that's where our healthy fast food can come in for them.
What is a menu going to look like in San Francisco?
So we believe less is more. So right from the start, it's going to be essentially 4 salads. Get any one of the 4 salads as a wrap, and then 4 smoothies. So we're taking our most popular salads and smoothies from our menu at our first location in Iowa.
What is your most popular item right now?
The Southwest salad. So It's made with our red butter lettuce and our micro radish that are both grown on site, started from seed. And the micro radish has a little bit of a kick to it, but then you have black beans, corn, tomatoes, avocado, and then the dressing is a chili limon. So It also has a kick. So that's by far our most popular salad. So we're excited to bring it here.
Okay. And is the full menu is vegetarian, it sounds like?
Yeah. So it'll all start with default protein options for chicken or tofu. Okay. But then the proteins, you can get the proteins on the side, the dressing on the side as well.
I see. Okay. And where does that, it's so funny. I always thought that Sweetgreen's success was mostly we have chicken that isn't canned. I mean, I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but that's what worked for me. So I'm curious how you think about all your other ingredients that you don't grow yourself yet.
Yes. So in parallel with searching for a location here, We're also working with some of our distribution partners to understand what they can source locally for us. So as an example, one of our investors and strategic partners is Capital City Fruit. It's almost coming up on 90 years as a family-run distribution company in the Midwest. And when we were getting ready to open the Clayton Farms Salads restaurant in Ames, and we had the home delivery service, we wanted feedback from our customers on what types of salads we should offer. So we actually rented a commercial kitchen. We made kind of a base set of a few different salad options, got feedback from the home delivery subscribers, and then every menu item and ingredient that we couldn't grow ourselves or it didn't make sense to grow at that scale, then we reached out to Capital City Fruit and said, first and foremost, source whatever you can from this ingredient list locally, and then we'll go to larger suppliers where we have to. And what's really cool is like our tofu is local, the honey is local. This time of year, the strawberries for our summer strawberry arugula salad are local. But then coming here, that's where I feel like there's so much more upside. Most of our menu that we don't grow should be able to be local.
That's awesome. And do you think, I'm trying to like peer into the future, is it trying to get more of those items grown vertically, or is it just more expansion? Like, what are the things that are coming up soon, I guess, that are important to you?
Yeah, so I mean, number one priority keeping me up at night is just location, location, location.
Yeah.
And so just yesterday looked at 5 more locations, and last week I've looked at a dozen locations, trying to understand it. And coming from the poker days, I'm obsessed with data and understanding like, who our customers are. So the demographic of like, what's the sweet spot, especially with the commitment of, brick and mortar, it's, 10 years on a lease. We want to become an absolute staple right out of the gate in the community. So beyond location, though, if I'm thinking like, big as possible, and we've got some great mentors and investors who are always challenging me to think as big as possible. And ultimately we want, 1,000+ locations. But what it really comes down to for me is the statistic that's out there right now, which is just mind blowing to me, is the average person living in the US is losing 2 to 5 years off their life from eating fast food. I know that I cannot break your fast food habits. So my solution is healthy fast food. If we can accomplish that, I think we'll get to a point in time within the next 8 to 10 years that 1 in every 10 people living in the US is a customer of ours. So today that's about 35 million people. 35 million people, if we give them a minimum of 2 years of their life back on average from being a customer, that's 70 million years contributed back to humanity. I would be okay with that on my tombstone.
Sure.
That's what keeps me going is, 8 years in, it still feels like day one. I plan to be building this company for the next 2 to 3 decades because that's what it's going to take.
And tell us, we were talking about this before we started the podcast. How did you get involved with Founders Inc? Me and Kartik met at Founders Inc, so I'm curious how you got involved.
Yes, so we were very fortunate. We were the first Iowa company to go through Y Combinator. In 2019, we were one of very few hardware companies as well. Hardware was not sexy then, right? And so like we struggled to raise. It just did not click with most investors. And after going through Y Combinator, then the pandemic hitting, and then us becoming the farm, and then we're like, ooh, this is really exciting. Like we want to be focused on the consumer side. I had a friend, Eric, who moved from Iowa out to San Francisco.
Eric's been on the show, early episode.
Awesome.
Eric Duntman.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, so Eric Duntman. He knew my background of poker. I had been like essentially a mentor while he was a student at Iowa State, and he had moved to San Francisco, jumped into startups head first. And one day he messages me. He's like, "Hey, can I introduce you to somebody?" He was walking around the office and asked if anybody here knew like past poker players who became startup founders or anybody working on indoor farming technology. And I told him like, I actually know someone who went from poker to indoor farming. And so I said, yeah, sounds good. Had a chat with Furkan. This was before the Founders Inc. fund even.
Sure.
And so Furkan, early believer, 2021, invested in us. And then over the last couple of years, I've been able to watch as I'll call it a bystander, being part of the Founders Inc. community, but based in Iowa. And I started to see I'm like, okay, another hardware company. Oh, another hardware company. And then one day I was catching up with Furkan and he told me about, the garage space and like having a dedicated space for hardware companies. And I said, well, okay, in addition to that, like how many Founders Inc. community members are showing up for like the daily lunches? And it was almost 100. And I'm like, I've got to get out there. So I flew out in May. He let me give a little talk on kind of our journey. And afterwards, everybody coming up, they're like, wow, this is so refreshing compared to like, what I thought somebody would be building if they're going to relocate here. And just the energy, the excitement, the density of talent. I reached out to the Founders Inc. team and I said, hey, do you all have space for a farm? If so, Daniel and I will be out. And we set up a small farm here just in the course of essentially 2 days. So
Amazing.
It goes up really quick, and it's going to be used for like a lot of our training, getting other people excited for recruiting, and then it can run in parallel to the actual location we find for the farm and restaurant.
It's a very classic Furkan story. I remember I was actually just listening to My First Million, and Sean was like, he's like, who are the 5 people that like changed the way you think about it? And he brought up Furkan. He's like, yeah, Furkan has these crazy convictions that he just like will not die on, and he'll chase them to the end of the earth. And I think like I remember vertical farming was one that came up. my brother and I had started a VR company in 2019, 2020, and
Okay.
Furcon was the first check into that because he got obsessed with Oculus Rift. So it's very funny that you were part of that cohort, and yeah, now obviously we've seen what's happened.
That's awesome. Some of my fondest memories for starting was, again, even though I was remote, the community cohesiveness
Yeah.
in the Ship It Fridays in the Discord. I'm like, dang, every single time I do one of these, this is like just pure energy. And then if somebody like crushed it, then it's that extra motivation. It's very much, I mean, as we all know, Silicon Valley is, give first mentality, rising tide raises all ships.
Yeah.
I've been here just over a month now, essentially, and every single introduction I've asked for, I've been able to get a warm introduction to. And it's just like, it's mind blowing of that. And also the founder life cycle that we have to give back. So ultimately, like, just give first mindset, be helpful. And especially when you're in a space like this, you're surrounded by 25 other companies. Everybody's at different stages, running into different hurdles. Someone has probably been there, done that within the vicinity.
And how do you feel like it differs from poker? I imagine poker is zero sum. Do I have that right? Startups are not, right? Like I try to help everybody. I agree. I think like the startup, especially the Founders Inc. culture is very give first. Poker is not, right? Do I have that correct?
Yeah. So I really struggled with this, and it's been weird to like, I was doing nothing wrong playing poker as a profession. I was paying all my taxes. Like I was literally sitting down in front of a computer for 18 to 22 hours a day, just like nonstop, just like grinding out poker, studying hands. I was obsessed. And then for it to be taken away, that's something like, it was just weird. It was weird. Like you're doing nothing wrong, and then overnight, just everything's gone. I would say because of that, but beforehand, I was missionary focused as a poker player. Like I truly wanted other people to see the love of the game that I did, because I think it was really good for critical thinking skills, deductive reasoning, like mathematics. Everybody could use a little bit of extra mathematics help.
Sure.
And so since I was obsessed with that hopefully, rubbed off on some people. And then for it to be taken away, I said, oh, okay. So then I like jumped into corporate America for 9 months as a marketing and technical writer, realized I'm unemployable. And I said, like, this isn't for me. So then I had to move halfway around the world to go back to playing a game that I loved. When I arrived in Dublin, I knew one person in the entire country, and I found an apartment to rent on Craigslist. Like I literally just arrived like airport to a coffee shop to Wi-Fi, and then like figure it out. And I told myself, like, I've tried the missionary thing. I'm going to be the mercy side for poker.
Sure.
Because at the time, especially in like playing and moving up in stakes, like the success in poker being measured by money won and lost, that really translates down to the zero sum game, like you mentioned, because basically if over a proper sample size, so millions of hands a year of poker, what I was playing, the bottom line is, if my mathematical ability is better than yours, I'm going to exploit your inability and take whatever chips you have on the table, whether that's a tournament or a cash game, right? And I'm so grateful for some friends who started to show me there's more outside of poker and mentioned that to me, because when they planted that seed and they said like, hey, like, I have a feeling one of these years, like after you realize like poker isn't everything, you may actually start something and you'll shift back to the missionary focus. And boy, were they right, like years before I even realized it. But I would say one more thing about poker, the career that I'm grateful for. It really helped me in understanding sample sizes and being process oriented instead of results oriented. So like in poker, I played multi-table tournaments. So I'd play 40 tables of poker at once, a few thousand hands of poker an hour, a few million hands of poker a year, hotkey set up for everything. You're folding like 90% of hands. And in playing multi-table tournaments was similar to day trading, where the majority of days you actually lose money. And I know that sounds crazy, but then like 1 or 2 days a month, you may like make a final table of a tournament, and first place is like, 150 to 1,000 buy-ins. And really having to focus on kind of that mindset of like, 5-6 days a week, I was break even, up a little bit, or like down. And so you have that mindset and you're like, okay, well, I fail every day in poker hands. And then all of a sudden, flash forward to startups, we've raised venture capital for Clayton Farms. And in talking to those investors, I'm like, oh, it's a sample size game. So I'm going to get a check per 50 or 75 investors I talk with. So I'm just going to go talk with 50 to 75 investors. And the ones who tell me they can't see it, it's like I'm kind of numb to, because like I'm so delusional that it's going to work, right? On one side, but the other side, I'm like, I'm used to getting beat up, whether it's boxing, trail running, or past career in poker. Like that's okay. It's just a sample size game.
So how far are you guys into the fundraising journey? I imagine you have a team now. Are you guys, you're post incubation, you did YC, you've done Founders Inc. Have you guys raised a seed round? Are you guys Series A? Where are you at?
Yes, we raised a Series seed round back in 2023 and haven't had to raise since. So we afterwards, and we went all in on the Farm Plus Restaurant model. We reduced burn because of that profitability by about 90%. And even though, so I'm the non-technical co-founder, like I can't code.
Sure.
And Danon's background, plant biology, mechanical engineering. And as we've thought about it over the years, like my thesis was like AI tools, like I want to be as early as adopter as possible.
Sure.
And so when we wound down the home delivery service and went all in on the farm and restaurant, Danon and I made an agreement with each other, like we were going to hold out until we were ready to pull our hair out for hiring for full time. And what I was able to do using CapCut AI, Canva Magic Studio, like we were able to replace, and like just even some basic Zapier automations, we were able to replace like customer success needs, social media, graphic design, and it's just interesting. Like the team's at 15 people today. Danon and I are full time. Almost everybody else is focused on farm production side or the kitchen side. When we expand here, what I'm really excited by is we'll find individuals with a lot of food experience, be front of house, back of house on the farm side. But then I want to surround myself with other builders because we'll be looking for hungry talent. And we all know startups are hard. So when startups don't work out, like I want to be like the first person there to like congratulate them for giving it their all. And just if they've got any inspiration from what we do, like I want to be talking with that individual as soon as possible.
Awesome. It's like an incredible journey. I want to take a kind of step back. Like when you said like, your goal is to serve this many people, right? And feed this many people and you'll be happy with that in your tombstone. I mean, that really resonates with me. One thing I think about a lot, especially when you think about nutrition and health in like America or any other, advanced country, when you think about this, like it's kind of weird. Like the better a country's doing, like on an industrial scale, like food is getting worse and worse. And you see this happening over and over again. Just like the heavy industrialization of food. Like you go to a Trader Joe's, you're not buying food. Sorry. Like, it's not happening. Yeah. And if you go into Whole Foods, the only Whole Food is like a couple of the steaks and everything else is just slop. And you see this happening, unfortunately, in other places too. So for example, I used to go to India like every, 5 or 6 years, pretty far apart. And now it's like every other couple of years. And the one thing I love though is you go there, all the food's incredible. Like, all the Indian food here is a joke when you compare it and you're feeling great. But I went there a couple of years ago and, now like cousins, stuff like that are ordering Swiggy. That's their DoorDash. It's like, why are you guys doing this? This fucking sucks. Like, it's like, I like
it's slippery slope to it.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope because it's happening. They're doing startups. Kids are making money over there. Like everyone's doing all this stuff. They're industrializing more and the food, unfortunately, is getting worse. And it's like, guys, there has to be another way. And if you go on Twitter now, it's always one of two options. Like it's like return with a V, like we're all going back to homesteading and making all of our food, and that's great. Or, we're just drinking Soylent or like Soylent shaped other stuff. But like, what is this other path? I mean, obviously what you're doing is that, but like, how do you kind of think about that outside of your own company? Like how can a very industrialized, innovative nation start eating real food again? And like, do you have hope that's going to happen?
I do have hope. Eternal optimist. Yeah. It's going to take like 1,000 people out there with my mindset working on their own thing to have huge impact across like all of the supply chain. So when it comes to thinking about like, the quality of the foods, why is it going downhill? 3 out of every 4 foods nowadays is like ultra processed, right? Bottom line, capitalism has made it that way. Case in point, I mentioned earlier, Sweetgreen. Like if you look at their reviews pre-IPO and post-IPO, like quality, and it's like, well, why is that? Well, like you're on Wall Street now. Somebody doesn't want this local farmer's avocados or whatever, and you're pushed that direction. Because our unit economics work with the on-site growing of the base ingredients, I actually think we can put people first and make venture capitalists happy. And
Sure.
so that sweet spot, I would describe it as like the spectrum is like one end you have the homesteaders, the other end you have Brian Johnson, Don't Die. And I've been able to take inspiration from both sides and cut through the noise.
Yeah.
Like I love seeing some of the statistics that Brian Johnson shares. What he is saying is it's the truth. Now my challenge to myself is how do I digest it? How do I say it in my own words, knowing who my audience is? And if my average customer is for the farm and restaurant is late female, career oriented, the walkability score of 100 here in San Francisco.
Yeah.
You're like, I can't be like, you're going to die if you consume like XYZ, or I can't share with them easily of like, hey, what you eat is your death sentence, and like try to scare. Like FOMO
Sure.
is not my thing. I like to say my superpower is JOMO, joy of missing out. But I do think that there's a way you can accomplish the call to action with like, hey, I think we can all agree if you walk into a grocery store right now, like most food there is not healthy, or the ultra processed, or the commoditization of it. It's absolutely like an endeavor that's why I'm so excited to spend decades trying to solve. And subconsciously, I think a lot of it has to do with when you think of the word farmer, it's humble, hardworking. Almost everybody has forgotten that. Or somebody will give somebody else a shout out, but then you can't put a face to it. And I think just by having a farming team member in there, literally harvesting a head of lettuce and greeting someone and just answering one or two questions about like, hey, here's the lights are on for 12 hours a day, etc. That's that connection that I absolutely think is a must. One more thought I have on the fueling and the nutrition. I have a crazy diet nowadays. So when we started the company, I drastically changed my diet. And then I got into ultra running essentially like a year and a half later. I was never a runner. Before that, boxed. So did some cardio, but never a runner. And I ran my first marathon. And then I said, well, running on pavement sucks. And then I found trail running. And I'm like, well, what is this ultra trail running? And I've been hooked ever since. And changing my diet has allowed me to do that. So today it's no added sugar and no alcohol for 8 years, no caffeinated beverages since 2009, and then also vegetarian for the last 7 years. One of the biggest reasons by cutting out meat, I'll say it now, not PETA related, it was like, ooh, what is actually going into the proteins? I like to joke that I would be like 10 times more likely enjoying some chicken in like Uganda or Tanzania than here in the States.
Yep.
But that's where my mind is today, and I'd like to think I'm like a walking, living trail running example.
Sure. Amazing. Do you think, so outside of what you're doing, which I think is going to have a big dent in this, and I'm sure you're going to see your vision through, what are other things you need to see happen? Like, do you think there's like ideas for like, young founder interested in nutrition that they can come and do to tackle this problem? Whether it's, is there a way to make better meat? Is there a way to do all these other things? Or like what problems specifically affect you in the company that you'd love to be solved that you're not going to solve yourself?
Yeah, so transparency. I've been around the crypto space since 2013,
Sure.
and I really appreciate the idea of like bringing something on chain, and especially if it's consumer focused.
Mm-hmm.
And so like in the back of my mind, I'm like, there's got to be somebody out there who will actually prove out on some kind of chain about like supply chain, and they'll kind of just put it out there, and then people can judge for themselves and start to realize like, whoa, the supply chain for food is way more finicky and brittle than 99% of the population realizes. I would love to see somebody working on that because that brings transparency. Something that we did 4 years ago now, almost 4 years ago now, is we had some patents pending on our technology piece, mostly around like the design. We decided to open source everything and abandon all patents. And when we open sourced it, the biggest reason was we have a consumer facing food brand. If an individual walks up to me in one of our places of business and asks me how much water usage we use or how much electricity we use, I want to be able to tell them. And so what we did when we open sourced all of that, and again, I have no eye for design. I'm colorblind as a person, so like nothing really fancy. Like here's our open source design, jump into GitHub, etc. But we're just transparent. Like if somebody wants to walk through for a tour, and they want to understand those numbers, we realized the moment we started sharing some of that data, we had other people interested in indoor farming space and the food space and owning kind of the supply chain reach out and be like, hey, have you ever thought about XYZ? Or another indoor farming company reached out and they said like, whoa, how are you producing that much food with just that energy? And as soon as we shared it with them, they realized like their lights were really inefficient. And so then it was a savings on CapEx, savings on OpEx for them. Plus, it's just better for the environment to not have extra lights, running. And so rising tide raises all ships. I think the open source transparency, anything around the supply chain to really peel the curtain back and then hold the accountability there is going to be key, especially in the coming years as everything continues just to become more brittle, in my opinion.
And is running the consumer facing business the reason you can do that? I imagine if you were just wholesaling, you probably wouldn't be as keen.
Yes. Yeah, I think you're spot on there. I like as soon as Danon shared with me kind of the two sides of that coin that we talked about earlier, and then pandemic hits, we're the farm, we're doing the deliveries ourselves. We start to hear the word choices from our customers, and they would describe it to us as, I'm at the grocery store. I buy this container of lettuce. I get it home. I enjoy the first salad. I put it in my fridge. The next day I go to enjoy another salad. It's all slimy. Why is that? So you look into it, and especially in the Midwest, it's 10 to 11 days old, 10 to 11 days into its 14-day shelf life. And the consumer becomes obsessed with the idea of, if I buy this clamshell, it's not going to last long. And if you're in the grocery store and you look at all the CPG brands of lettuce, it just blends in. Like, sure, somebody does like a brighter label compared to a darker label, but it just blends in. And that has the mindset of it's commoditized. It comes from like big factory farmed. Whereas in like even a fourth of our social media is me just like talking. And it's like, here, put a face to name. If I have to become the Newman's Own and I'm on the bottles, to have the impact, that's fine by me. Like whatever it takes. It's like consumer, like people want to talk with people. I'm a firm believer that people buy from people as well. And I think a lot of people forget about that.
How did you end up on naming the company after yourself? I'm curious what that discussion went like, or is there anything funny there, or is it just straightforward and not a big deal?
No, so it's funny to me. I actually hated the idea, and it was not my idea.
Oh, okay, interesting.
So one of our main partners and one of my main mentors is Jamie Siminoff, founder of Ring. And when Jamie has been supportive of us now since 2022, has been like essentially one of my main mentors. And when we were thinking about expanding and going all in on like burn the boats on consumer facing, farm, own it all, it was still nebula. And at the time, our home delivery subscribers, who, as I mentioned, early 60s female, misspelled it every which way, which was not their fault. It was our fault. And Danon and I created the company's name by smashing two words together, and we got this domain. And then everyone's like, is it Nebellum, Nebulum, Nebulum? How do you spell it?
Yep.
And so there was already that disconnect. And Jamie pointed out to me, he said, you've got your email signature says chief farmer instead of CEO. A lot of people know you as chief farmer. They know Danon as the chief engineer. Clayton Farms has a ring to it. And I just instantly rejected him, like, just cringe. And then I was telling Danon, and he's like, no one knows how to spell Danon. Like, they think it's like Danon yogurt. And I'm like, okay, so you like it? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, man. So then it was so weird. And, you hear a lot of feedback on pros, cons, like don't have the name, unless you're a law firm, right? Like don't have the name. And when we all agreed to it and then did the rebrand and like switched from, my email, c@nebulum.com to c@claytonfarms.com, I'm like, okay, this is it. Like, but then since changing it, one of the coolest things that I think has happened is then some of our earliest supporters and mentors have all reached out and they're like, man, you put your name on it. Now we know it won't fail. And I'm like,
okay, nice.
Yeah, that's right. Like, it's so much more tied in. And I've drank the Kool-Aid. Obviously, I'm drinking the Kool-Aid Eternal Optimist every day. Yeah.
I think, Dell has a quote about that, right? I think like a very similar feeling, like this is named after my family. Like I can't fail.
There you go. Yeah. And especially with the idea of like, this is like, I'm betting my entire career on this. And I understand, the VC game, 5-10 year time horizons. It doesn't make sense for a lot of investors with us because as soon as I say, hey, like there's not a single company out there I'd be excited to sell to. I've got 2 more decades worth of building to do of this. With that not lining up that timeline, it's like, a couple of decades from now, hopefully, Michaela and I have had a family, kids can learn the business side. And I'm like, that's what gets me excited by it. Outside of Michael Dell, I really like the Made in America book, the Sam Walton story, the idea of like, when he was scouting out locations, he flew a small plane over areas and like got into the nitty gritty of it. But then it talks about a lot about like leaving a full legacy for the family. And I'm like, man, that's life goes by so quick. A couple more decades is only 240 months. It's not that crazy.
Yeah. So maybe going public one day. You got to tell your investors something. Yeah.
There we go. Yes. Yeah. If I had to choose one of the paths, that's the only path. Yeah.
Okay. Amazing. That's great. I guess the last thing here, I'm kind of curious. Last two things. Do you feel like you have peers? Like, imagine when you were in YC and you're doing hardware, said you were kind of alone. But now, like, going in more niche, down to nutrition and like food system, do you feel like you have peers, like here in San Francisco or anywhere else, like a group of founders that are all working on this? Or does it feel like a kind of a small ship still?
As far as the nutrition side, I very quickly get out of my element. And that's because I'll describe it as this, like the more scientific, the harder it is for me to translate.
Sure.
Because since I'm non-technical, the speech impediment before, I have to break things down to like the simplest terms. I actually like to joke that the reason why we arrived at the assembly of our growing equipment is like, if I can assemble it, anybody can assemble it.
Okay.
And so over the years, like fewer parts, fewer problems. So as far as the nutrition side, get out of my element pretty quickly. The hardware side though, it's like a 180-degree difference than it was when we went through YC. One of the companies that I took a lot of inspiration from that was hardware when we went through the winter 2019 batch was Trexo Robotics with Monmi. And so building like kind of exoskeletons for, I believe they started with for kids with cerebral palsy, if I'm not mistaken. And it was like to hear his story about like, here's why the need exists and the mobility, and you can see the smile on the kid's face. Like it hit me. Like I don't have kids yet, but it just like hit me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like this does need to exist. Today, I think they're crushing it. But it was so cool to have like somebody to chat with, even just at the dinners of like, hey, building in atoms and not bits this week. Cool. It's like, few and far between.
Okay. And for anyone listening, what do you need? You said you're thinking about hiring. So what are the kind of roles you want, or what are maybe some partnerships that you want to make? Just leave some room at the end for some shout outs and things that could be helpful for you in the company.
Yes. So shamelessly, we want to do essentially like a salad deposit or launch pre-orders in the coming days for the San Francisco location.
Okay.
And when that goes live, it'll be available on ClaytonFarms.com.
Okay.
Essentially, somebody will go to the website and choose San Francisco. It'll say VIP treatment, salad deposit. So really excited to launch that within the next couple of weeks. If anybody wants to chat, like I'm pretty open. My email is just the letter C at ClaytonFarms.com. Reach out if you think I can help. Get excited by urban farming, get excited by food systems, get excited by even ideas like people buy from people and just want to jam on business models and marketing. Happy to connect. And now that I'm in SF, like I feel like I have a lot of time to make up for. And I love the pace at which everything goes. So I'll even throw out there if any trail runners are listening to this and want to join for a training run, let me know.
Okay, amazing. Clayton, we are thrilled to have you here in San Francisco. And thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us.
Thank you, guys.
All right, this is awesome.